What if I told you that before Yahweh, the God of the Bible, there were black gods? What if the divine was once envisioned with dark skin, woolly hair, and eyes that held galaxies? Can you even imagine how the truth, buried under centuries of conquest and religious manipulation, is calling us back? Back to a time when divinity wasn't whitewashed, a time when the sacred was a reflection of the people who worshipped it. What if everything you believed about the origins of Yahweh was incomplete? What if I told you that these ancient black gods were the foundation of a spirituality that not only nurtured life, but gave birth to the very essence of creation, justice, and healing? These gods, with their powerful connection to the earth, sky, and ancestors, were not myths. They were the memories of a forgotten truth, lost to time by those who sought to erase the very soul of a people. Why don't we hear about these gods in Sunday school? Why were they replaced with one singular divine figure, Yahweh, and why has the true image of God been hidden for so long? Could it be that this divine manipulation was not just a theological choice, but a way to control and suppress spiritual autonomy? In this video, you will uncover the lost history of the black gods that were erased for centuries. We will explore how these gods were at the heart of African civilizations, gods like Osiris, Anubis, and Pa, gods whose stories were once as alive as the rivers of Egypt and the deserts of Nubia. You will understand how Yahweh's rise to power wasn't a simple transition of divine worship, but a battle for control over spiritual identity itself. By the end of this journey, you'll know why the divine has always had the face of the people who worshipped it, and how this truth is more liberating than you can imagine. Stay with us, and together we will rediscover what was lost and claim what was ours from the very beginning. So, drop a 77 in the comments if you're ready to hear the truth that religion fought to silence. Subscribe, like, and let's walk together as we unveil the sacred history that's been hidden for millennia. Before Yahweh became the singular God worshipped by millions, before the name of God became synonymous with power, there was a time when the divine was understood in a very different light. A time when the gods who created and shaped the world were not isolated from humanity, but intimately connected with it. These gods were not distant, cold figures locked away in temples or atop mountains. They walked among the people, understood their struggles, and shared in their joys. They were reflections of the people who worshipped them. And these gods, these powerful black gods, were at the heart of ancient African civilizations, gods whose very existence carried wisdom, healing, and life itself. They were the foundation of a belief system that reverberated through every aspect of daily life. The gods of ancient Egypt, Nubia, Kush, and beyond, gods like Osiris, Anubis, and Pa, were not just figures of mythology. They were living forces, part of the earth, the sky, the rivers, and the very breath of the people. These gods understood the cycle of life and death. They were gods of creation, justice, and rebirth. Their worship was not rooted in blind ritual, but in an understanding of the divine that transcended time, space, and culture. But as the tides of empire and conquest swept across these lands, these gods began to disappear. They were rebranded, stripped of their power, their names erased from sacred texts, their altars torn down, and their worship condemned. Over time, they were replaced with something different, something new, something that came from a culture far removed from the roots of the land. The gods of ancient Africa, with their deep connection to the earth, to the ancestors, to the cosmic balance of the universe, were branded as demons. Their images were smashed, their temples destroyed, and their names buried in the sands of time. Why? Why erase gods that reflected the people? Why remove a divine connection so deeply rooted in the earth, in the cosmos, in the human soul? Because these gods did not conform to the new order being built by the conquering forces. These gods were not about submission to a hierarchical, distant authority. They were about spiritual autonomy. They invited people to connect with the divine directly, through nature, through ritual, through community. They did not demand control. They offered freedom. And that freedom was a threat. The gods of ancient Africa embodied the essence of life and death, creation and destruction, balance and justice. They were reflections of the people who worshipped them. Their very existence threatened those who sought to control not just the land, but the spirit of the people. But in the struggle to control the soul of a people, a new God emerged. The God of Israel, Yahweh. The rise of Yahweh was not a peaceful transition. It was a radical transformation. The gods that had been worshipped for centuries were replaced, not through peaceful dialogue, but through conquest. Yahweh, who had once stood alongside other gods, began to take center stage. The Israelites did not walk into a land devoid of divinity. They entered a land that was already rich with ancient traditions, gods that had been worshipped for thousands of years. Yet, as the new faith began to take shape, the gods of the land were not merely disagreed with, they were erased. The sacred texts that told the stories of Yahweh's people did not engage with the gods that had come before him. They simply condemned them. They did not question their existence. They did not try to understand them. They sought to remove them entirely, and so began the process of spiritual colonization. As Hebrew monotheism took root, the gods of ancient Africa were systematically wiped from the memory of the people. Their names were erased from history. Their worship was condemned as idolatry. The gods that had once been at the heart of African civilizations were silenced. But in the process of silencing these gods, something important was lost. The people lost their connection to the divine, a connection that had been rooted in their very identity, their very being. But here is the truth that has been buried for so long. The divine was never white. It was never distant, cold, and removed from the people. It was never meant to be something that existed only in temples, separated from the struggles and joys of everyday life. The divine was always close, always present, always part of the people. The black gods that came before Yahweh were not inferior. They were not demons. They were not primitive. They were the original reflection of divinity. They were gods of creation, gods of life, gods of justice, gods of balance. They were gods who understood the deep connection between heaven and earth, between the divine and the human. They were gods who walked with the people, who shared in their struggles, who celebrated their victories. And here is the most profound lesson we must learn. The gods that came before Yahweh were not just gods of the past. They were the ancestors, the ones who laid the foundation for everything that came after. They were the ones who understood the sacred rhythms of life, the ones who understood the true nature of divinity, and their wisdom is not lost. It is still here, still alive in the earth, in the air, in the rivers, in the songs and dances of the people. The divine has always been with us. The truth that was erased has not disappeared. But it lives on in our spirits, in our souls, in the very fabric of our being. And now it is time to remember. It is time to reconnect with the divine that has always been a part of us. It is time to reclaim the gods that were lost, to remember the wisdom that was erased, and to honor the ancestors who walked with us before Yahweh. This journey is not just about understanding the past. It is about reclaiming the power that was taken from us. It is about remembering that we are not disconnected from the divine, but deeply connected to it. It is about recognizing that the divine is not something separate from us, but something that is within us, around us, and a part of us. The black gods of ancient Africa were not just gods of the past, they were the gods of the future. And now, it is time to embrace them again, to reconnect with their wisdom, their power, and their love. As we journey forward, let us remember the divine that walked with our ancestors. Let us reclaim the spiritual freedom that was taken from us. Let us honor the gods that were erased, and let us walk together in the light of their wisdom. The truth has always been with us. It is time to remember it. It is time to reclaim it. In the centuries following the rise of Yahweh, something crucial happened in the narrative of God's image, something that has affected generations. The God we worship today, in so many cultures, has been whitewashed, stripped of his true divine essence, and reimagined through the lens of European conquest and empire. The images we have been shown for so long, the pale, golden-haired Jesus, the pristine white angels, the fair-skinned depictions of God himself, are not just inaccurate. They are spiritually damaging. But what if I told you that these depictions of a white God are far from the truth? What if, in fact, God, from the very beginning, existed in a divine body that looked like the people who worshipped him, dark-skinned, strong, radiant, with the power of creation and justice intertwined in his being? You see, the very concept of a white God comes from the same source that tried to erase the power of the black gods that came before him. It's a narrative built on fear and control, not truth. The image of a white God was not crafted out of a spiritual necessity, but rather to fit a political agenda, to reflect the empire's dominance and its insistence on hierarchy, submission, and fear. But when we look at the true God, the one who existed before the empire, we see a God who is not constrained by skin color, by empire, or by man-made images. He is, and always has been, limitless. In the heart of ancient Africa, long before the establishment of Yahweh as the sole deity of Israel, there were gods, black gods, who ruled the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. These gods, like Osiris, Anubis, Pa, and Mahat, were not mere symbols. They were life itself. They were gods who shared a deep connection with the people who worshipped them. Their worship was not confined to temples or idols. It was a celebration of life, a connection to the land, the animals, the ancestors. These gods understood the full range of human experience, from creation to destruction, from birth to death, from the laughter of life to the sorrow of loss. They were gods of balance and justice, gods who did not rule from afar, but walked beside their people, guiding them, shaping them, lifting them. And yet, when empire after empire came, these gods were erased. Their images were destroyed, their altars torn down, their names erased from history. They were replaced with Yahweh, who, as history shows, was initially not alone. He had a partner, Asher, the goddess of fertility, balance, and life. Archaeological evidence reveals that Yahweh and Asher were worshipped together, but over time, as Hebrew monotheism took hold, Asher's name was erased. Her image was scrubbed from sacred texts. She was removed not just from history, but from the spiritual consciousness of the people. And in her place, Yahweh stood alone. But let's ask ourselves, why did Yahweh need to be alone? Why was there such an effort to erase Asher, a goddess whose presence symbolized the earth, the feminine, and the balance of creation? Because the image of a single male god ruling over all was far more convenient for those in power. It allowed for a hierarchical structure where the divine was something distant, removed from the people, something that could be controlled and used to justify empire and conquest. The erasure of Asher wasn't just theological, it was cultural and political. It was an attempt to control the image of the divine and reshape it in the image of empire. But in the process, something was lost. the divine feminine, the balance between the masculine and feminine, the understanding that the earth itself was sacred, was erased, and with it the true, complete image of God was lost. For thousands of years, the idea of a God who was both masculine and feminine, a God who was both creator and destroyer, judge and nurturer, was hidden behind the veil of monotheism. The fullness of the divine was reduced to an image that fit within a patriarchal colonial framework. Now, let's return to the core of what we are talking about. Why does it matter that we understand this history? Why is it so important to recognize that the God of the Bible, the true God of creation, was not white, was not distant, and was not a tool of empire? It matters because the image of God we hold shapes our understanding of ourselves, our identity, and our relationship with the world around us. For centuries, black people have been shown an image of God that does not reflect their reality. They have been told that to be like God, they must look like the people in power, the people who colonized and enslaved them. This is spiritual racism at its core. It's a system that says that to be holy, you must be white, and everything else is inferior. But here's the truth. God is not white. God is not European. God is not a product of empire. God is limitless, and he has worn black skin, and every shade of skin since the beginning. He was with the people before there were cathedrals, before there were crosses, before there were laws and rituals that separated people from their own connection to the divine. He was with the people in the beat of the drum, in the dance, in the song, in the prayer of the body moving freely with the earth. This truth is liberating. It frees us from the lie that our worth is tied to the images of God that have been imposed upon us. It reminds us that we are made in the image of the divine, and that image is not something distant and foreign. It is something that is alive within us, something that has always been a part of us, even when we were told otherwise. It calls us to reclaim our spirituality, our heritage, our connection to the earth, to the ancestors, and to the divine that has never left us. But this truth isn't just about rejecting the whitewashed image of God. It's about reclaiming the fullness of the divine that is both masculine and feminine, the divine that is both creator and destroyer, the divine that is found in the earth, in the sky, in the bodies of the people. It's about remembering the gods who came before Yahweh, the black gods who were erased, and honoring them once more. It's about remembering that our connection to the divine is not something that can be taken from us. It is something that has always been within us, and it is time to bring it back. So, why does this matter? It matters because, as we reclaim the image of God that reflects our true identity, we are reclaiming our power. We are reclaiming our heritage. We are reclaiming the divine spark that has always been a part of us, even when we were told it wasn't. And as we do this, we begin to heal, not just individually but collectively. We begin to heal the wounds of colonization, of enslavement, of erasure. We begin to reconnect with the divine that has always been a part of us. And in that reconnection, we find true freedom. This journey is not just about reclaiming the past. It's about creating a new future, one where the divine is no longer separated from us, one where we can see God in the people around us, in the earth beneath our feet, and in the heavens above. It's about restoring balance, restoring justice, and restoring the sacred connection between heaven and earth. It is time to remember the black gods who were lost to history. It is time to reclaim the divine image that was stolen from us, and as we do, we reclaim our power, our identity, and our connection to the divine. God is not white. God is not distant. God is here. God has always been here, walking with us, within us, and through us. And now it is time for us to remember. The rise of monotheism did not happen overnight. It was not an easy or quiet transition. It was a revolution that began with the rejection of multiple deities and culminated in the singular worship of Yahweh. But let's not mistake this evolution for a peaceful ascent. It was a battle fought in the hearts and minds of the people. The gods who once walked with the people, the gods who understood the divine connection between nature, the earth, and the ancestors, were slowly replaced by the image of a singular, all-powerful God who could not be questioned, who could not be challenged. This process was not merely theological, it was political, cultural, and spiritual warfare. At the heart of this shift was the consolidation of power. The gods of the land, black gods, gods with deep ties to the earth and the people, were not simply defeated by reason or wisdom. They were erased through force, through conquest, through the systematic destruction of their altars, their idols, and their very names. Yahweh's rise was not born from revelation alone. It was born from the need to control, to dominate. It was not enough to merely present Yahweh as the one true God. The gods that came before him had to be condemned as false, as demonic, as something to be destroyed. The memory of these gods had to be wiped away to make space for a singular narrative, a singular God who demanded total devotion, total submission. But in this process, something essential was lost. The connection to the divine that existed in nature, in the body, in the breath. The people were no longer invited into a direct relationship with the divine through the earth, through ritual, through their own bodies. Instead, they were told that they could only find connection to God through the temple, through the priest, through the written word. The divine became something distant, something separate, something that could be controlled and mediated. The sacred relationship between the people and the earth was severed. As the centuries passed, the image of Yahweh grew more refined, more distant, more abstract. He became the God of Israel, the God of judgment, the God who demanded exclusivity. The gods of the land, the gods of the people, gods like Asher, the goddess of fertility, balance and life, were erased from memory. Asher was once the consort of Yahweh, the one who stood beside him in the divine realm. But as the monotheistic revolution progressed, her name was scrubbed from the record, her image destroyed. The divine feminine, the earth goddess, the balance between creation and destruction, everything that she represented, was erased. This wasn't just a theological shift. It was a cultural and spiritual purge. But in the erasure of these gods, something was missed. In the drive to establish Yahweh as the one true God, the fullness of the divine was lost. The balance between the masculine and feminine, the connection between the divine and the earth, was broken. The people were left with a God who was removed from the world around them, a God who was not to be found in the soil or the wind, in the dance or the song, but in temples and holy places, places that became increasingly inaccessible to the everyday person. The shift from a pluralistic, polytheistic worldview to the strict monotheism of Yahweh wasn't just a theological evolution. It was a rupture in the spiritual fabric of the people. It was a fracture that disconnected the divine from the everyday, that reduced the sacred to something abstract and distant. This new God, Yahweh, became a symbol of power, a God who demanded submission, a God who could not be questioned. But in this shift, the divine intimacy that existed between the people and their gods, the connection that came from a life lived in harmony with nature, was lost. The divine became something to be feared, not loved. It became something to be obeyed, not embraced. But even in the midst of this spiritual upheaval, there were whispers of the old ways. The gods who had walked with the people were not completely erased. Their memory lived on in the earth, in the people, in the rituals that could not be fully suppressed. And these whispers are not just echoes of the past. They are a call to return to the roots of spirituality, to a connection with the divine that is not mediated by empire, by priesthood, or by hierarchical authority. They are a call to reconnect with the earth, with the ancestors, with the divine that is within us all. The history of monotheism, the history of Yahweh, is not simply a story of divine supremacy. It is a story of spiritual struggle. It is a story of people trying to find their way back to the divine, of people seeking a God who could walk with them, who could understand them, who could be found not in distant temples, but in the wind, in the fire, in the water. It is a story of a journey from disconnection to reconnection, from fear to love, from submission to freedom. The spiritual evolution of Yahweh is not just about the triumph of one God over others. It is about the struggle to reclaim the fullness of the divine. It is about reclaiming a connection to the earth, to the body, to the divine that is within us all. It is about restoring the balance that was lost when the gods of the land were erased. It is about remembering that the divine is not something distant or separate from us, but something that is with us, in us, and around us. Now, let's talk about the legacy of these ancient gods. As we move forward, it is not enough to simply accept the narrative that has been handed down to us. We must reclaim the divine that was lost. We must remember the gods who were erased. We must reconnect with the wisdom and the power that they carried. And as we do, we will begin to heal, not just as individuals, but as a people. We will begin to heal the wounds of colonization, of empire, of spiritual disconnection. We will begin to reclaim our power, our identity, and our connection to the divine. But how do we do this? How do we reclaim the gods of the past? How do we reconnect with the divine that is within us all? It starts by remembering. It starts by acknowledging that the divine is not something external to us, something that can be controlled or manipulated by those in power. It is something that is within us, something that is part of who we are. And by reconnecting with that divine spark, we begin the process of healing. The journey of reclaiming the gods of the past is not just about looking back. It is about looking forward. It is about creating a future where the divine is once again intimately connected with the people, with the earth, and with the ancestors. It is about restoring the balance that was lost, about reclaiming the sacred connection between heaven and earth. And as we do, we will discover that the divine is not distant, not separate, but alive and present in every moment of our lives. The story of the black gods is not just a story of the past. It is a story that is still being written today. And as we walk forward, we walk with them. We walk with the gods who walked with us before, and we reclaim the divine that has always been within us. As we close this journey together, I want to reflect on what we've uncovered. The truth we've explored, the wisdom we've reclaimed, and the divine light that has always been within us. The story of the black gods, the spiritual history erased by time, is not just a tale of ancient civilizations, it's the story of us all. It's a reminder that the divine has never been separate from us, that it has always walked alongside us, within us, and through us. The gods of our ancestors were not just symbols of power and creation, they were reflections of the people they served. The divine was never distant, never removed, never something that could be controlled by empire or authority. It was alive, it was real, and it was intimately connected to the earth, the skies, and the very breath of life. This truth is not just about the gods who came before Yahweh, it's about the divine that has always been a part of us. It's about remembering that we are made in the image of the divine, not as distant, fearful subjects, but as beloved children, connected to the Creator in ways that transcend history, race, and religion. The black gods were not just ancestors to be honored. They were the divine presence that lived in and through the people. The earth, the sun, the rivers, and the sky were not just symbols. They were the manifestations of the divine. The divine was in the dance, in the song, in the rituals that tied people to their heritage and their spirituality. When we reclaim this truth, we not only honor the gods that were erased, we honor ourselves. We reclaim the fullness of our own identity, our connection to the divine, and our place in the spiritual history of the world. The divine is not something foreign to us. It is a part of our very being. And as we reclaim this understanding, we begin to heal. We heal the wounds of colonization, of enslavement, of erasure. We heal the falsehoods that have been told about our worth and our divinity. We heal the deep disconnection that has been forced upon us, and we restore the sacred balance between heaven and earth. The journey to reclaim the forgotten gods is not just about looking back. It's about moving forward with a new understanding of who we are, who we have always been, and who we can become. It's about remembering the divine spark that has always been within us, even when we were told it wasn't. And when we embrace that divine power, when we walk in the fullness of who we are, we create a world where the divine is no longer something distant, something to be feared or controlled. It is something that flows freely through us, through our communities, through the earth itself. As we close this chapter, I want to remind you that this journey does not end here. It continues with each step we take, each choice we make to embrace the divine within us. And as we walk forward, we walk together with the ancestors, with the gods who came before, and with the divine that is always with us. If you feel that this video has touched your spirit, if it has helped you find the light amidst the darkness, I invite you to share a little bit of that light with me so I can continue creating and sharing these stories. Your support, in any form, is deeply cherished and means more than words can express. Every small act of kindness, every like, every subscription, every comment, these are the energies that keep this work alive and flourishing. Your presence here is a blessing, and together we are building a community of spiritual healing, remembrance, and empowerment. So, if you feel called to, take a moment to like this video and share it with others who might need to hear these truths. Leave a comment with your thoughts, your reflections, your experiences. Let us continue to uncover these forgotten truths and share the divine wisdom that is part of us all. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being part of this journey. Your support, your energy, and your love are what keep this movement going. Let us walk together in the fullness of who we are, and may the light of the ancestors guide our steps.